Kingsglaive Final Fantasy XV is a 2016 animated film directed by Takeshi Nozu. The nations of Lucis and Niflheim are at war. The most powerful guardians of Lucis are called the Kingsglaive. They defend the realm with magical throwing daggers that allow them to travel across short distances to aid their combat. As a means of ending the war, the nations of Lucis and Niflheim draft a treaty that would give land outside of Lucis' capital, Insomnia, to the people of Niflheim in exchange for a ceasefire and the protection of Insomnia itself. Understandably, this draws a mixed reaction for those defending the realm, but it's all a trick. Niflheim stages the treaty as a means of gaining access to Insomnia, and hostilities break out worse than ever before. It's up to the improbably named Nyx Ulrich to save the day, rescue a princess, face a monstrous dark knight, and various other fantasy tropes that hamper this very, very bad movie. The visuals look like something from a Final Fantasy game, and no, that is absolutely not a compliment. There are different expectations from a cutscene on a PlayStation to a feature film that, yes, was actually released in theaters. That's really the only compliment one can give Kingsglaive. In spite of it looking and feeling like a video game, it is a proper movie. It was released in theaters, it is nearly 2 hours long, and it moves at the pace of a film. It qualifies as a movie and not a trailer to a video game. Admittedly, that is damning with faint praise, as this qualification means that Kingsglaive must be judged on that level. Every character in this film is wedged tightly within the uncanny valley. The eyes are dead and their lids close much with the same mannerisms of an American Girl's doll. Their flesh is waxy and unnatural, their hair sometimes stands perfectly still, and this inherent weightlessness of their bodies destroys any impact that the action scenes potentially could have delivered. The character models are less fleshed out than in Beowulf, a CG film released a decade ago. The world in which they inhabit is a bizarre jumble of fantasy elements lifted from classic Tolkien, with the fate of the world resting on a magic ring, Game of Thrones with its warring factions outdoing each other with one duplicitous act after another, and Star Wars with its combination of sci-fi technology and sorcery, not to mention drawing inspiration from its own convoluted games. Fans of the video game series might shout and cheer at the appearance of a familiar purple octopus and the many other references to the game's rich mythology, but in and of itself, this is not something to watch except for some kind of Final Fantasy completionist. In the English language version of Kingsglaive, the protagonist, Nyx Ulrich, is played by Aaron Paul of Breaking Bad and BoJack Horseman fame. I love Aaron Paul, but he's just using the Jesse Pinkman voice while playing a heroic knight who uses chiefly British forms of English words in his grungy American accent, and it absolutely does not work. The voice actors often do not match the characters. I've never seen a greater dissonance between voice actors and characters in an animated film before, and the fish lips and bad synchronization of the voices do the film no favors. In fairness to the voice actors, it would be difficult to show enthusiasm while reading wooden dialogue and sounding out goofy fantasy names and trying to give them gravitas. Okay, if I can simply deviate from talking about this bad movie, why are video game movies always bad? In the 20 plus years of Hollywood attempting to adapt video game movies into big budget feature films, I struggled to find any that received any kind of real critical success or even mild audience adoration outside of camp value or niche appeal. A handful of them are financially successful, like last year's Warcraft, but with one notable exception, they almost never have enough bank at the box office to warrant a proper franchise. So commercially, critically, however you want to slice it, movies based on video games are garbage. There are a myriad of tired arguments about why this is. There are superficial reasons why adaptations might not work. Gaming is interactive, and adapting something that is functionally disparate creates inevitable loss in translation. There is something to that. It's not invalid, but it's also not everything. Based on some articles I've read, gamers want to believe that these films deviate too far from the source material, or that the movies are actually fine, but that everyone is just too much of a critic to admit it. This kind of defensiveness is not helpful in this discourse, not to mention that it is demonstrably false. Directors who are and are not game enthusiasts make similarly unattractive, forgettable movies about said source material. I have no fondness for video games, so take all of this as an outsider's opinion without the trappings of fandom. I don't think it's as complicated as the hundreds of think pieces on this have claimed. It's not some complicated puzzle. Video game movies have a lot going against them from Jump Street, but they are also products of a movie-making industry that produces more middling to bad movies than good in general. This is all going to sound like Film School 101, but it bears repeating. Making a movie, especially a big budget movie with lots of moving parts, is incredibly challenging. It's not just one director's vision. There are writers, producers, actors, musicians, crew, and thousands more who contribute to creation of a single film. Ever try to count how many people have to be recognized in the creation of a film in the ending credits? That's not even complete. There are usually uncredited script doctors and others who had a hand in it. To paraphrase and perhaps modify Sturgeon's law here, most movies are trash. That's not a slam on the medium. I love movies, but it's actually just a testament to its complexity. When a movie goes right, it means everyone brought their A game. This is Rotten Tomatoes around the time I am writing this. Yeah, I know, Rotten Tomatoes is ruining film criticism, blah blah blah. Anyway, movies opening this week. 4 out of 5 are bad, and 1 is okay. We will all probably forget about it in a couple weeks. Top box office, so this is what everyone goes to see, and half are rotten. And of the fresh movies, really only 2 have any solid consensus on its high quality. So most video game movies are bad because most movies are bad, but that does not account for nearly all video game movies being bad. That's because video game movies, in addition to having the deck stacked against them in a general sense, also have one more hurdle. Who is making them? A video game adaptation does not attract auteur directors or high-quality blockbuster directors because even though gaming is now on even footing with film in terms of money to be made, the concept of a video game movie is still laughable because nobody has made a good one. And the best of the best directors and writers don't want to invest their time and their reputations into something that has always provably been a failure critically and almost always a failure commercially. Let's use another previously maligned film subgenre and its meteoric rise as an example. It took a long time for superhero movies to lose their stigma of silliness. After all, it was like a comic book thing, and that's for nerds. It's not an exact one-to-one comparison, but there were a lot of bad superhero movies after the 1978 Superman. But then Christopher Nolan and Sam Raimi, as examples, helped pave the way in the modern era. Now Shakespearean director Kenneth Branagh, action stalwart Shane Black, pop culture icon Joss Whedon, and others are comfortable making movies that used to have a bad reputation. Video game movies, on the other hand, have men like Uwe Boll and Paul W.S. Anderson helming projects. Recent film Hitman 47 had a first-time feature film director in the chair, and the Angry Birds movie had 2 first-time directors, to say nothing of the people who write these things and who they get to act in them. Like I said, movies aren't the sole property of one person, but the talent involved in all of them are middle of the road. Video game movies need their Iron Man, and that can create a trend and incentive for major creative forces to get on board. As it is, we are stuck with, oh yeah, Kingsglaive, oh, okay, back to Kingsglaive. Kingsglaive was directed by someone whose only other film directing credit is another Final Fantasy movie, and written by someone with similarly limited experience. In fact, most of the director's background is in making video games and not movies, as if the two are more or less interchangeable. They are not. And that's the real problem here. Nobody who has already made it big in the motion picture industry, either with critics or with major studios, want to do video game movies. These movies are for directors who are just coming up and want to get attached to a big budget movie, any big budget movie, or for directors who have no other choices. Meaning there are no great video game movies because nobody worth a damn is willing to attempt to make a great video game movie. So it becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Kingsglaive is just the latest in a long line of trash video game movies. Maybe the trend will change one day. I always hope for good movies no matter where they are derived. But a quick look at the people involved in most video game adaptations should tell you everything you need to know about whether or not this will be worth your trouble. Hi everyone, if you like what I do, consider clicking on the orange Patreon link below. That's how this show happens. It's also a way for you to request an episode, so check it out.